again, but the uncertainty associated with how much money you're going to spend on renovation, and that's assuming that everything goes according to plan. If something goes wrong, if you hit latent conditions, if there's an issue, that blows out the window. So I think people like it because it creates a level of certainty.
Yep.
Whereas traditionally, I guess when we were in a more, call it, normalized environment, a normalized market, you'd know that you could get, an electrician or a plumber or what have you, and they're going to charge you whatever the rate is, and you'd know that rate. You can say, yeah, I'm going to do that bathroom, and it's probably going to cost me, 20 to 25 grand as an example. Now you'd be looking at it going, geez, how long's a piece of string? I don't know what they're going to charge me.
Yeah.
And people don't want that uncertainty, especially when you go and factor that in with all of the other uncertainties associated with where we're at in an economic cycle perspective around cost of living, interest rates, fuel, war in the Middle East, you know it.
Yeah. And then I think that on that, I mean, renovation, you're seeing a tangible result at the end of it, but there's also the ongoing maintenance bill that is associated with the dream home that doesn't actually factor into a lot of the, actual enjoyment out of it. Your costs of, roofing repairs, having a new roof doesn't actually, bring you any net benefit from the lifestyle perspective, or to most people does it. But, you've got heating and cooling systems that are usually larger in your dream home. There may be something that's more conservative, more expensive to replace when something happens. There's plumbing and electrical.
Welcome to 360 Money Matters, where financial planners Billy and Andrew talk all things financial planning. This podcast aims to increase your knowledge and confidence with all things money. Each week, they will cover topics such as investing, cash flow, budgeting, saving, passive income, debt management, and much more, so you can live a life on your terms without limits.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 360 Money Matters podcast. I'm Billy and I'm joined by my co-host,
Andrew. Bills, here we are back again, back on the audio waves.
Andrew, we are back on the audio waves and we love it week in, week out, bringing a whole heap of value to our listeners and our viewers. What are we talking to everybody about today?
So today we are talking all about the hidden costs of buying your dream home. So the things that everyone forgets about when you go down the route of buying your dream home.
Actually, it's interesting because we were talking about this in light of the federal government changes and all of that stuff to the budget. And what does that then mean for property and investments? And specifically, we're talking about investment properties. So this is quite timely because one of the things we were discussing is that what we're starting to see and hear and discuss with people is that they're starting to put more money into their owner-occupier homes.
Yeah.
So I think
as similar to buying an investment property.
Yeah. I think this is really timely. Andrew, let's kick it off. Where do we start with this?
So it's not about the purchase price. So it's all about the cost of actually owning the property. I think that where it all starts. I mean, often you can sit there and, look at a purchase price and say, all right, this is what it's going to cost me. And this is, what the expectations are. But at the end of the day, there's the cost of actually purchasing the property. There's the cost of, your mortgage repayments and the cost of all of that stuff. But you need to make sure that you're not forgetting that there's council rates, that there's water bills, that there's utilities, that the larger home usually comes with a higher maintenance cost.
Yep.
And if you don't have the cash flow to be able to support it, or if that's detracting from some of the other things that you're doing, you need to really consider that it's not just the cost of buying the house, it's the cost of maintaining the house.
Yeah, and that can't really be understated as well too, because I guess a lot of the conversations that we have with people, it's about, how much money do I need to save in order to purchase the property, and plus stamp duty and all the other stuff that happens with it as well. But once you make that purchase, it's not just that. It's not that, hey, I've got a mortgage repayment of X per month now. It's all the other stuff on top and associated with that. Look, most of the time, we're seeing people with variable rate mortgages, and in an interest rate environment where I guess we can say that it's moving around more frequently than what we're used to over the past. That cost is probably the biggest one that jumps into people's minds. But I think it's a really good call out because there's all this other stuff and they don't stop.
Yeah.
They do not stop at all. They just keep on coming. It's the gift that keeps on giving, right? So it can't be understated. I think that probably pivots into renovations, Andrew, because that's the one that we've been talking about previously just now. But renovations don't stop and they never end up costing you what you think.
Yeah, whenever you're putting your budget together for renovations, it's like add 50% more as a bare minimum.
Yeah.
And you might end up somewhere close to where you might actually, end up paying. But I mean, look, whenever you are looking at renovation costs, and like truth be told, I am a huge fan of adding value to a property, because when you do add value to a property through renovations, you can drastically improve your end result in terms of what the property is worth without exceeding. So you might put $100,000 into a property and you might actually get out, $200,000 worth of value at the end of it. And there is a reason for that. And so, yes, renovation costs are sometimes not what you think. The benefit of it, and some of the reasoning behind why a renovated property is usually worth more than the cost of the renovation, is for someone to be able to do that, and for you to be able to fund the cost of renovation, you had to first buy the house. And let's assume in this scenario, you're talking about a 20% deposit, right? Say you buy a property for $1 million, 20% deposit, you need $200,000 plus stamp duty in order to buy the house. If you're then doing renovations and those renovations cost you $100,000, you need $300,000 plus stamp duty in order to be able to have a property that is a renovated property, at a certain valuation. Say you're buying a property that's worth $1.2 million that's fully renovated. A 20% deposit on a $1.2 million property, you're now talking about, yes, your initial, $200,000 as a deposit, but another 20% on the top up. So then additional $200,000, you're talking about 40 grand. It costs you 240 grand.
Yes.
Yep. As a deposit versus 300,000 to do the renovations yourself. So in terms of upfront funds that are required, because of the fact that in a renovated property, you can borrow an element of the funds versus in an unrenovated property that you're then doing it on your own, buyers are more inclined to spend more money on a renovated property than maybe the cost of renovations in itself. So there's upside potential there, but you need to factor in that once you start pulling a property apart, once you start doing renovations, one, you're already in it, so your only choice is through. And two, once you start to uncover things, it ends up costing significantly more than what people budget. And if you don't have a solid backup strategy in play, people can get caught out.
Well, like you said, once you started the project, I guess you committed to it. But so in my experience and the things that I see, exactly what you were describing, but the two things. So turnkey property where you can purchase and move in and basically you don't have to do anything because it's all been done. I think people are really attracted to that for two reasons. One, you don't have to do anything. But two, you can see it, it's already there. And there's no, using this analogy or this example you used before, I'm paying 1.2 as an example, and this is what I'm getting, as opposed to I'm paying $1 million, but I'm going to spend, I don't know what it's going to cost. And the truth is, when we look at the cost of construction, at least here in Victoria, like Andrew said, add more and then probably add more again. But the uncertainty associated with how much money you're going to spend on renovation, and that's assuming that everything goes according to plan. If something goes wrong, if you hit latent conditions, if there's an issue, that blows out the window. So I think people like it because it creates a level of certainty.
Yep.
Whereas traditionally, I guess when we were in a more, call it normalized environment, a normalized market, you'd know that you could get, an electrician or a plumber or what have you, and they're going to charge you whatever the rate is, and you'd know that rate. You can say, yeah, I'm going to do that bathroom and it's probably going to cost me, 20 to 25 grand as an example. Now you'd be looking at it going, geez, how long's a piece of string? I don't know what they're going to charge me.
Yeah.
And people don't want that uncertainty, especially when you go and factor that in with all of the other uncertainties associated with where we're at in an economic cycle perspective around cost of living, interest rates, fuel, war in the Middle East, you know it.
Yeah. And then I think that on that, I mean, renovation, you're seeing a tangible result at the end of it, but there's also the ongoing maintenance bill that's associated with the dream home that doesn't actually factor into a lot of the, actual enjoyment out of it. Your costs of, roofing repairs, having a new roof doesn't actually, bring you any net benefit from the lifestyle perspective, or to most people does it. But, you've got heating and cooling systems that are usually larger in your dream home. There may be something that's more conservative, more expensive to replace when something happens. There's plumbing and electrical issues. There's, costs of painting a larger property as opposed to something smaller. There's your landscaping, your gardening, all of the additional costs that come into just maintaining a more expensive property. And, there's some rules of thumb out there around what this usually costs, anywhere from sort of 1% to 2% usually of the value of a property on a per annum basis. So the more expensive the property, expect that there's going to be more that you're going to need to do from an ongoing maintenance side of things as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's amazing how they can creep up, and when you factor in 1% to 2%, it is quite expensive, and that doesn't stop. Probably one of the other call outs that I've got that I tend to think about when we think about property is you think about improvement and call it value add versus maintenance and replacing something. So you might talk about upgrading your windows from single glazed to maybe double glazed. Yes, you're getting something different. You're getting a better building product. It's going to work its way through in terms of maybe acoustics and definitely from a thermal property perspective. But I don't see it as a upgrade or an increase.
A potential buyer is unlikely to spend an extra $100,000 for,
Exactly. So I think there's a really key distinction to be able to say, okay, is this maintenance as in maintaining what's existing? And that includes replacement as well. Take, redoing your roof or something versus are we doing something to improve the value of the property? And probably just on that note, because owner occupiers are slightly different from an investment perspective, what we are missing here, and one of the things that we should call out is also, yes, you are spending that money, but the utility that you can get from that product or from that upgrade throughout that point in the ownership cycle.
Yep.
So, you go and landscape your garden as an example. Yes, you are adding value to the house. You're increasing its value, but throughout those years that you own it, that you get to enjoy it and seek all of the benefit associated with that. And one of the things that I always tend to laugh at is when people go, okay, we're thinking of selling the house, so we're going to paint it, we're going to redo our bathroom, and we're going to do this. And it's like, don't do it for a new buyer. Do it for yourself, enjoy it, and then sell it down. Andrew, what do we got next? Insurances.
Yeah. When you are talking about, the dream home, your building insurance is more expensive. Your contents insurance is more expensive. You've got, mortgage protection. If you are in LMI territory, you need to pay your mortgage insurances. There's usually a more expensive loan. So income protection, life insurance is more important, and you want to make sure that that's, fully covered. If you do have a more expensive mortgage, and the risk and the continual, rising costs of insurances does mean that it's just another layer of things that you need to start considering in that, all right, yes, I've got a more expensive mortgage and that's going to detract from my cash flow, but my insurances to protect and make sure that I can continue to fund that mortgage is also going to be more expensive, which is also going to impact my cash flow. So it's the layer of expenses that start to creep in over time that really impact the potential cost of the dream property.
Tell you what, we're not really stating a very good case for buying an owner occupier. At least, well, we're in Melbourne and Victoria, and obviously Australia wide, we're starting to see the property market soften right across the country, but we're not really painting a really good picture.
That's what we're trying to do here, right? Is show the other side of or the downside of the dream home.
So now it's a good opportunity to pivot to the opportunity cost of owning your dream home, I guess. And look, it's not even just a dream home, it's a home. But then obviously the bigger the property, the more expensive and what have you. And this almost rolls into a debate of sort of rent investing versus not. But if you look at some of the opportunity costs associated with it, so if you think that those things that you were describing before, your money is going towards those things, what's some of the things that it could be going to that it's not?
Yeah.
All right. So the big one that I tend to look at, and if you think about, your property costs you X, your cash flow or your income is Y, or your surplus is Y, what's the additional money that you've got? What could you use that towards, rather than if you detract, a lot of those things from the calculation that we we're talking about. The big one that jumps to mind for me is investing. You've got different opportunities. You've got, investing inside super, which is favorably taxed for us in Australia. You've got investing outside of super, which brings a whole range of different accessibility opportunities, and then obviously a different tax regime. You can build up your emergency fund. You can fund children's education. You can have probably fantastic holidays each and every year for the cost that it's going to cost you to I don't know, look after your house.
And that's a really important point, right? Like, as advisors, we sit here and we talk about, hey, rather than putting it towards this asset against your family home, what are the other considerations around where you can put the funds and the impact that that's going to have? But you then also consider it from a lifestyle perspective, and you say, okay, well, what's going to give me more enjoyment out of life? Like, you know, for a lot of people, when you're talking about the impact of an additional mortgage, you're looking at you're looking at it in the sense of, it's going to cost me $1,000 a month, or it's going to cost me 1,500 a month, for the impact that that's going to have on my wealth creation. But you then say, okay, well, $50 or $1,000 a month, that's 12 grand a year. Like, okay, it's not a huge difference, maybe in comparison to what you're already paying on your mortgage, but that's, an overseas trip every year. That's what will give me more enjoyment? Is it upgrading the family home and living in a nicer property, and that just becomes your state of play? Or is it, okay, every single year we're going to go on an overseas trip with the family, and that's going to improve our lifestyle to a larger extent? So yes, there's the financial opportunity cost around what you could be doing with your wealth, but there's also the opportunity cost of, okay, well, am I intentional with the decisions that I'm making? And am I making decisions based on what's going to improve my lifestyle, or am I trying to keep up with the Joneses?
Yeah, Andrew, you've nailed it. You've absolutely nailed it. What I think, so say $1,000 difference per month, which is the example that you use between, say, mortgage repayments versus rent.
Yeah.
But then when you go and factor in those other things that we're talking about, insurance costs of $1,500 a year, repairs and maintenance of 1 or 2%, plus, 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 plus. You go and add all of those things in, and it's maybe not $1,000 a month difference. Maybe it's two.
Yep.
And then you start to look at that and go, okay, now we take a traditional position when we're thinking about this, and not just us, but thinking about it from a wealth creation and from an investment perspective, that you do that, you get the utility of your family home throughout the years as you're living in it, and you need somewhere to rest your head. Kind of understand that and raise your family with the understanding and the expectation that you're going to experience capital growth.
Yep.
Now, for the first time in a long time, I think it's fair to say, as Australians, there's a question mark over the top of that.
Yeah.
So we're looking at this going, okay, is the juice worth the squeeze? Should we be more focused on a different strategy and talking to the team at 360, rather than just going down the traditional pathway of saying, yep, I'm going to be a good citizen, I'm going to purchase a house, I'm going to pay my taxes, I'm going to pay my home loan down, I'm going to raise my family. And at the end of the day, the house that I bought now is going to be, back then, to raise my family, is going to be worth X in the future. I can downsize and live happily ever after. Not so sure.
Yeah. And then there's also the question around investment properties as well. I mean, you factor this in, and I think that, a flip side to the other argument, if property is your strategy, right? And I think what Billy or what we're talking about here is that not necessarily just a dream home, but just property in general and the cost of holding property, is you say, okay, well, on one hand, you've got this asset class that traditionally has given us some pretty solid returns, and even at, average rates of growth, because of the fact that you're leveraging, and you're leveraging at such a large extent, you've got a net result at the end of it that's quite large. But in an environment where there's question mark around capital growth, you're caught in a bit of a conundrum. It's, okay, on one hand, you've got investment properties and you've got some rental income coming out of it, which will help offset some of the costs, and maybe rental yield will grow. But then you've also got to factor in that, okay, well, negative gearing, is being impacted. The capital gains tax that I'm going to pay at the end of the day is going to increase. There's some debate as to what extent and all of that stuff, but I'm going to pay more in capital gains tax in the future than what I otherwise would have. You then factor it in and say, well, that's on the premise that I actually make money. If I don't make money, then, what happens then, given what's currently happening in the property market? And so there's one side that says, okay, well, I need to divest outside of property. And sorry, I also forgot land tax and, the additional tax that you're paying in land tax because of COVID bill and all of that.
So wait, there's more.
Yeah. But so do I avoid all of that and just say, hey, I'm going to pump it all into my owner occupied property and at least I'm going to enjoy it. And if it's all in an owner occupied property, I get to enjoy the fruits of, living in a more expensive property. I get to enjoy the fruits of, the lifestyle benefit that comes out of it. And at X point in time, maybe kids are out of the house. I don't need such a large property. We can downsize, capture that, and use that to provide your retirement income. Or do I then say, well, there's a big question mark around property prices just in totality. I need to diversify and I can't just rely on either an owner occupied property or an investment property. And I need to have my hand in multiple buckets. And I think that that's what we're talking about here is, pumping everything into an owner occupied property, living in the dream home. There's risk that's associated with that. Owning investment properties, there's risk that's associated with that. Not owning property at all and investing in just shares, there's risk that's associated with that. But doing a number of different things and having a number of different strategies, yes, there's risk that's associated with it, but it's a lot less than just putting everything in one bucket.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because the game has changed. The environment that we're experiencing is different. And I'm just going to use some quick maths associated with what you were describing before, right? Let's say you buy a house worth $1 million. You're going to pay back $2 million, right? You're going to pay an interest bill of another $1 million, roughly. That is insane. No, hang on, wait. But wait, there's more. There's more, right? Let's say you earn $100K after tax and you're 30, right? And you finish working at 60. That's $3 million that you're going to earn. Real quick, simple maths across that time frame. You're going to spend $2 million, 2/3 of that on your owner occupier. One is going to be the cost of the property, and the second is going to be the interest bill that you pay over the 30-year term. So you've gone and spent 2/3 of your working career income on an asset that we are no longer sure about, that the environment, that the government has manipulated, manufactured, tampered with, is going to create the rate of return that Australians need in order to secure their financial future, like previous generations have done it before. Yeah. This is nothing but highway robbery, and you're robbing future generations, plain and simple. But when you look at it from that perspective, exactly what you said, your one strategy should not be one strategy. It needs to be, you need a lot more thinking, and you need to be a lot more intentional around what you're doing, because it's not as simple as, I go and buy a place for $1 million. I spend a couple of $100,000 on renovations and bits and pieces. That playbook is out the window. We're starting to see issues with cash flow. We're starting to see issues with mortgage stress, where even despite higher incomes, people are still spending 40, 45, 50% of their income to service their mortgage. So they're hanging on for dear life on an asset that we're not certain is going to grow the same way that it has grown in the past, which, what does it do? It means that there's less disposable income to spend on a whole range of different things. There's reduced ability to invest. There's less, safety money, emergency funds, different bits and pieces. There's less discretionary spending, which impacts the economy. There's concern written right across the board with this too. And we're still not sure where we're at from an inflation perspective and whether or not inflation is going to continue to rise. And the RBA is going to need to increase interest rates as a result of inflation rising. Now, just on the government thing, inflation's rising because the government's spending too much money, plain and simple. So really big question mark. And when you start to put some really simple numbers around it like that, you look at this and go, well, hang on a sec, maybe I need to rethink my strategy and talk to an expert in the field to say, okay, what do we do from this point onwards moving forward?
And I think that that's the closing remarks in all of this is, you have to have a strategy, and your strategy needs to encompass a number of things, because the direction and the trajectory on property prices, like that landscape has shifted in a very short period of time. Yes, in Victoria, we haven't experienced the same level of property growth. And in other states, we've been experiencing ridiculous property growth. But you're talking about the trajectory and the expectations around property of an entire country shifting essentially within the space of a few months. So if you're considering that, okay, my strategy is solely reliant on one asset class and the rhetoric can change that quickly, you have to be looking at other options. You can't just put everything into one asset class or into one strategy, and you have to diversify, because this was not on the table 6 months ago, and your strategy can't change that quickly, and you can't enter and exit without huge, capital gains or stamp duty and all of that implications in such a short period of time to get ahead of it. So you need to make sure that your strategy factors in a number of different opportunities and a number of different things in order to make sure that you're going to get there at the end of the day from a retirement income and a lifestyle perspective.
Andrew, well said. And we advocate for it each and every week. I think, for us, we're quite fortunate because uncertainty creates opportunity for us. And it means that people, when there is trepidation, when there is uncertainty, even when there is opportunity, it creates more conversations with people. And I think ultimately you've summarized it nicely, that you need to be speaking to somebody who knows what they're doing. You need to get some advice because the game has well and truly changed, and the stakes are a lot higher now too.
Yeah.
And if you don't have, a proper strategy in place, you can lose decades and decades and decades and not end up where you should rightly end up with your wealth creation. And ultimately, what does it do? It impacts your lifestyle and your financial security, and nobody wants that, right? So, Andrew,
Bills, thanks for another great podcast.
thank you. And to our viewers and our listeners, I hope you got a whole heap of value out of that. As always, if you want some further information, Andrew and my details are in the show notes. Like, subscribe, make sure you share with your family and friends, and we look forward to catching you on the next one. Thank you. Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions on what we talked about or would like to have a chat about your money journey, visit us at 360fs.com.au. The information in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal objectives, financial situation, or needs. It is not financial, legal, or tax advice and should not be relied upon as such. You should consider whether the information is appropriate to your circumstances and seek professional advice before acting on any of the information provided. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance. This information is provided by Billy Amaritis and Andrew Nicolaou of 360 Financial Strategists Proprietary Limited, authorised representatives and credit representatives of Acumen Financial Planning Proprietary Limited.